So we're 3 weeks into a fairly new theme. The title of the theme is Metaphor, Magic and Mystery. So I'm going to just recap briefly on the theme for those who weren't here a couple of weeks ago. So you could say that all of the Buddha's teachings, all of the Dharma, is method to help us to make progress towards the goal of enlightenment. And a large part of that Dharma, a large part of the Buddha's teachings are rational. Okay? They appeal to our rational mind. We come across them and they really make sense to us, so that's very attractive. So the Dharma gives us a clear conceptual framework. It gives us lists and words and concepts and systems. And we're encouraged to think very clearly, to really sort of absorb that information, really sort of know it as deeply as we can. But that clear thinking, those words and concepts only take us so far, okay? And the reason for that is that we're not just thinking beings, are we? So our rational mind, as rational as we think we are, our rational mind is sort of just a surface coating of the rest of us. So more of us are longing beings, desiring beings, feeling beings. So words and concepts in themselves, they can't capture or define reality. They can't capture or define the Buddha. They're useful as maps of the landscape, but they're not the actual landscape. So you could say that our rational minds aren't big enough in themselves to perceive reality. So the only way that we can go further and approach closer to the goal, to get a flavour of it, is through using metaphor and poetry, and by evoking mystery and magic. So a lot of what we take for granted, a lot of what we think we know, is actually metaphor. So for example, we know that as Buddhists we're committing to a spiritual path. We say things like that all the time. But spiritual, what is spiritual? Spiritual evokes something. So we know what it likes. That most of our lives are caught up in material things, in the senses, in the sense world. And spiritual just evokes what might lie beyond that. And then we talk about progressing along a path. Okay? So, we know that's a helpful image, isn't it? So, I'm here, the goal's over there, and I need to progress along this path to get closer to the goal. So, as a metaphor, it's great, but actually the experience of living your life isn't like that, is it? It's far more complicated than that. Another metaphor. Even the word Buddha, which we use probably in every talk that we give in this centre, is a metaphor. So the word Buddha means he who is awake, he who woke up. So we all know what it's like to be in sleep, maybe to be caught up in a dream world which is pulling us this way and that, and then we wake up from that, don't we? So we know that experience of waking up. So that metaphor of waking up, the Buddha, is a very sort of evocative phrase. But just because we use that name for the Buddha, that doesn't mean we know who the Buddha was, what his experience was. In a way, we give names to things in order to make reality small enough to fit in our limited rational minds. But the trouble is, when we give something a name, we assume we know what it is. And that can be a mistake. It's a mistake to equate the names we give things with the actual reality. Okay, so it is definitely helpful to have a clear idea in our minds of the goal and what to do in order to make progress. But we need to resist the temptation of assuming that we know what that actually means. We need to keep a sense of openness to not knowing, to mystery. And I think that includes other people as well. You've all got a name. So when I see someone and in my mind their name comes up, and then just because I know their name, it's almost like I assume I know everything about that person, but I don't do I? Other people are really a complete mystery. So when we're relating to each other, it's important to stay open to, well, I don't know that person actually. And having that openness, that is also helpful. Okay, so that's the territory that we're exploring tonight and in the next few weeks. Metaphor, magic and mystery. And we're very fortunate tonight that tonight's talk is going to be given by Padmavajra. Okay. So I'll say a little bit about Padmavajra. Some of you might never have seen Padmavajra before. So Padmavajra became an order member 40 years ago, there or thereabouts. 40 years this year? 40 years. So he's been in the order a long time, and he came along to his first class at a Buddhist centre as a teenager. And his first experience was to be taught the Mettabhavana, like many of us, and to take part in a ritual, to take part in a sevenfold puja. And that was enough, that Padmavajra sort of knew that was what he wanted to do with his life, and these were the people that he wanted to do it with. So it's as if a deep energy was activated in Padmavajra, which for the next 40 years has been unfolding and he's been channeling. For the last 25 years, Padmavajra's been living and working in Padmaloka Retreat Centre in Norfolk. And he's been part of the ordination team there. And that's a team of people who guide men through the process of ordination training. And in relation to us, in relation to Sheffield Buddhist Centre, he has a very grand title of President. Okay, so a President of a Buddhist Centre is an experienced order member from a different centre who visits 2 or 3 times a year. And I think the best description of a president, of a good president anyway, is that they're a good friend of the centre. They're a good friend. And Padmavajra is indeed a good friend to many, many people. And I think Padmavajra is a good friend because he's got a very flexible approach. So he's able to act appropriately in different contexts with different people. So he has the ability to inspire and clarify through his Dharma teaching. But there's also times when he's able to challenge people when they're stuck, but also able to encourage and bless people when they're doing well, and also able just to drop all of that and hang out and have fun. Okay? So my experience of Padmavajra, I first met Padmavajra here. I think I'd just become a mitra, and Padmavajra used to visit occasionally, and he wasn't the president then. And so I just had this impression that Padmavajra was this ordinary bloke who I just saw occasionally at the centre. And then I went on a retreat at Padmaloka, and Padmavajra gave a talk there. And I thought, wow, this person that I thought was just an ordinary bloke, he's got real spiritual weight and depth. And then I think the first time I met up with you, Padmavajra, we realised that we had something in common, which was that we both lived and worked in India for several years. So we used to meet up, talk about India, drink chai, eat curry, watch Bengali movies. So it was a very sort of easy way of being with each other. And then I asked Padmavajra to be my preceptor. So the preceptor is someone who ordains you at the time of ordination, gives you your name and witnesses your commitment to the 3 jewels. And that's a much more weighty type of relationship. So there's been times that Padmavajra has been able to say what needs to be said to help me make progress, to activate my confidence, to activate my inspiration. And in a way, that's what Padmavajra is doing for the whole Sheffield Sangha. He comes and he's activating our confidence. He's activating our inspiration, our desire to make progress as a Sangha. When I'm in India, so when people meet you in India and they know you're an order member, one of the first things they ask you is, who's your preceptor? Yeah. So I say Padmavajra, and then the response is usually, oh. Great man, great man. But when they share their memories of Padmavajra, it's very, very ordinary stories, usually involving food. So there's this combination of real sort of sense that he's loved and admired, and he's quite an ordinary person in some ways. So I really love that combination with Padmavajra. So yeah, Padmavajra combines a very ordinary human approachability. It's very easy to be with. And that's combined with a great depth and weight of experience. And you know what he wants. You know he wants the best for you. And I think that's true also, you know, when you're visiting Sheffield Padmavajra, we know that you want the best for us, and you will say and do whatever's in our best interests. So yeah, we're very very blessed to have Padmavajra as a friend of the Sangha. Very remarkable and very ordinary. And tonight, Padmavajra is going to be talking about the Buddha and the Dragon King.
Well, thank you very much, Maitri Das. So I don't usually get long introductions to when I come and give talks in Sheffield, so that was very, very lovely to hear that. I thought that was an exemplary rejoicing in merit, actually. I mean, I don't mean about, you know, quite objectively, that if you want to do a rejoicing in merit in somebody, because a really good rejoicing in merit of someone is actually quite challenging. Because hearing all that, there's part of me going, well, I've got no excuse now to, you know, not make effort in my Dharma life if those are the qualities that people see. But it's very lovely for you, you know, of you to say that. And of course, one of the reasons why, you know, maybe I have this kind of effect on people here is because of the nature of the Sheffield Buddhist Centre. It's a particularly warm and appreciative Sangha, wider Sangha, spiritual community. Yes, I have many friends here, but I think there is a very good culture of friendship between people, and I think that's very important and very, very precious. You know, it's something not to take for granted, to always keep working on and developing. It's quite a rare thing, I think, to have people coming together with real friendship and in real friendship and appreciation. And it is something to keep working at. Our teacher, Sangha, is very fond of Dr. Samuel Johnson, who had a saying, you keep your friendships in good repair. You know, don't take them for granted. Keep them alive, keep working on them. And I think that's very much part of the culture in Sheffield. So it's a pleasure to come here. Always an education for me, because living at Padmavajra in the swamps of South Norfolk, you know, I get a bit like that. You know, I'm on retreat a lot, and you know, living in quite a close community. It's very, very good to come into contact with people who are involved in a city centre and all the challenges that go with that. So it's very, very helpful for me. I learn a lot, you know, about how people are living their Dharma life in very, very different circumstances to me. So it's a real highlight of my year, coming here twice a year. So I'm giving a talk on the Buddha and the Dragon King. The Buddha and the Dragon King. So we need to, I think last week, didn't you have Mokshatara on Mara and all that, the evil one, Namuchi, the Lord of Limitations. So we're going to move forward a bit in the Buddha's enlightenment after the story of Mara. We're going to have a look at post-enlightenment. So the Buddha's enlightened. In some way or other, he, sitting beneath the Bodhi tree, he sees into the nature of existence decisively. There's this vast vision of the whole of existence, seeing right into its heart, into conditionality, particularly his own and others. And that seeing deeply into things leads to liberation, a completely boundless liberation. And in the ancient texts that describe the Enlightenment, you get a whole sort of sequence of events. You get the impression Enlightenment isn't one thing. It's not as if there's one bang experience and that's Enlightenment. It's much more of an unfolding sort of sequence, if you like. So you get these stories of the Buddha moving from the Bodhi tree at Uruvela, which is now Buddha Gaya in northern India, moving from the Bodhi tree to various other trees. And in one of the trees he sits under. All of these trees, by the way, he sits under for 7 nights and 7 days without moving, in a state of profound meditation. And one of the trees he sits under is called the Mucalinda tree, a wonderful large tree with great big leaves, the Mucalinda tree. And again, sitting there for 7 days and 7 nights, unmoving in meditation, undergoing or experiencing, I don't know what the language here, what is called the bliss of liberation, the Sukha Vimoksha, or the Vimoksha Sukha. This is very important to, that we get a real feeling for this, that enlightenment, the state of Buddhahood, is a state of unbounded bliss, happiness. Very important, because sometimes, you look at, descriptions of the Buddhist life, and it can be a bit sort of, worthy and heavy, but, it's a blissful path to a blissful goal. Very important that, if you're really serious about ecstasy, you ex-clubbers, maybe some of you aren't ex-clubbers, maybe you're still clubbers. If you really want ecstasy, you've got to go for enlightenment. That is the absolute fullness of bliss, the supreme great bliss, because there is this complete dropping and seeing through any blocks, any attachments, any clingings, any barriers. There's this completely open-ended bliss and happiness. So he's sitting in this sort of timeless space. In a way, one of the things that Sangha feels about the Enlightenment is that after sort of seeing into things, he said it's as if you have to think of the Buddha's life that, all his energy has gone into to this pursuit of truth and reality. He's devoted everything to it. He's left home, he's gone forth, he's tried out all these different things. Absolutely everything in him has gone into this. It's like a great torrent, the Buddha, before his enlightenment. It's like a great torrent of water, just moving towards the edge of a precipice, and then it's over the edge. That's what enlightenment is, into this vast space. So of course, after that, there's going to be a period of very, very deep absorption. Really, perhaps even moving into a different sort of level of consciousness to sort of reflect on what's happened, because enlightenment is beyond all language. It's a Padmavajra, beyond the sphere of thought, completely without any moorings in concept and idea. So then, in a way, what then has to happen, the Buddha has to start reflecting, to try and understand, try and put into ideas or images or whatever it might be, what is this? Partly for perhaps his own understanding, but also in order to be able to communicate to other people, because it's no good sort of turning up and just, spacing out in silence, thinking people are going to sort of get it. They probably will misunderstand and do something really nuts if you do that. So anyway, he's having he's sitting under these trees. Now under the Mucalinda tree, while he's sitting there, Out of season, this is May time, so the height of the Indian summer, pre-monsoon, although you can get a few showers at that time, but it's a really, really hot time, believe me, May in India, especially in northern India. But out of season, suddenly there is a massive thunderstorm and a massive howling of winds and rains pouring down on the Buddha. And at that moment, when the rain started to fall, a great snake, a great cobra, a naga, a dragon, came out of the earth, wound himself 7 times around the Buddha, around the Enlightened One, and his great hood came over the top of the Buddha's head, and the great Naga, the great King Cobra, the Maharaja, he is thinking, I am going to protect the Enlightened One from this rain. So he becomes like this sort of great umbrella, this great cobra hood. You see this actually in Buddhist art. You'll see images of the Buddha with this great snake around him and this great hood over his head. And there's this rain pouring down. When the rain stops, clouds disperse, the sun appears in the vault of the deep blue Indian sky. The great snake uncoils, comes off the Buddha, goes in front of him, and then suddenly transforms into a beautiful 16-year-old Indian prince. A lovely turban and lovely silks and jewels, and he bows to the Buddha and disappears. So this is the story I want to try and make sense of this evening, this beautiful story. After this, by the way, and I'll probably maybe read this a bit later, the Buddha gives what's called a new dana. Well, maybe I will read it now. After this has happened, after this wonderful visitation, this great snake protecting him from the rain, and then when the sun comes out, this beautiful young prince bowing to the Buddha and then disappearing. The Buddha sings, "Blissful is solitude for the one who is content, who has heard truth, who sees. Blissful is not harming the world. Blissful is love for all beings. Blissful is peace through the end of craving. But the real, supreme bliss is the fading away of the I am conceit." So he's describing his bliss. So I want to try and talk a little bit about this story. One of the how can we approach it? Well, one picture I'd like you to have in your mind is first of all of the Buddha beneath that Mucalinda tree. Don't think of him looking, lovely though this image is, looking like that. The Buddha was a yogi. He was a shramana. He was a wandering mendicant. He would have been wearing very, very rough, sort of probably dark yellow rag robes, just cloth that he'd stained in the mud. They're not robes in any kind of religious sense. They would have just been, he would have been a rag robe dweller. He would have been extremely lean, from the fasting that he'd been doing before he took solid food. He would have been very, very clear and soft skin, probably quite dark. Very often in Buddhist art, he's depicted as gold, but probably he'd been living out in the sun, in the jungle, so he'd probably been quite dark, but glowing, really glowing. Might have even had some stubble, maybe even a bit of a beard, and his hair might have even been quite long, maybe tied up a bit, but really looking like a forest dweller, a proper yogi, really on this path. Sometimes the Buddha and his disciples, when they sang of their sense of freedom in the forest, in the jungle, they describe themselves as being like some wild thing of nature, because they have that sense of freedom, this sort of untrammeled quality to their consciousness. So that's what he would have been looking like, sitting in meditation. So to get that sense of the Buddha as the sort of yogi absorbed in this deep experience of bliss and truth. And then, okay, where should we go to next? Let's have a look at the great king Cobra. You've probably seen cobras. I never know quite what's the best way of saying it. Is it Cobra? Cobra. Anyway, sorry. Whatever it is, Nagas. Cobra is a Naga as in Bodhi Naga, which can also mean dragon. Naga can also mean elephant, by the way, in Pali. But we have a beast here that has tremendous sort of mythic resonances in Indian tradition, especially the king Cobra. They are extraordinary creatures when you see them. I've had glimpses in the jungle in India. I gave a talk on Padmavajra once at our retreat centre near Pune, and out of the foundations after this talk, in the middle of the night, came this great shining black cobra, a real Maharaja. And the order members and mitras, you could tell the ones that had really lived in the villages knew exactly how to guide this magnificent creature out of our way. Light going ahead and somebody tapping behind, and this magnificent creature going away. They really are extraordinary. And of course dangerous, powerful, from the underworld. Not to be, definitely to be respected. There's a wonderful story, by the way, of a women's retreat in India, a women's retreat for order members, and I think women who asked for ordination. They were having their lunch in our retreat centre near Bodily, which is right in the jungle. And it's very hot, so all the doors are open. So there they are, sitting around on the floor, on the stone floor, having their rice and curries at lunchtime. That's the main meal. And suddenly, up the steps, right into the middle of the room, comes this magnificent cobra. And he goes right up, opens his hood, and looks around, swaying, and its tongue going in and out. And the women on the retreat eating are getting really, really frightened. And somebody says, no, what the Buddha says when you encounter a snake is that you must develop metta. So why don't we practice that? Let's all, there are actually, in the Pali Canon, there are quite famous sort of songs of metta for the different kinds of snakes that you would chant and sing. Very important if you're living in the jungle, to be able to do this. So they just stopped eating. They directed their loving kindness at the snake that stayed there, looking around, and then down it went, and off it went. But it's an amazing. I talked to people who were there, and it was. They say it's kind of mesmerising, seeing a cobra like that. It's kind of hypnotic. There is a kind of fascination about it. So that's that, and yes, there's an enormous mythology around the cobra, around the Naga and the Nagas in Indian mythology. Yes, they are the dragons, the snakes, and they're famous for guarding as in Western mythology, great treasures, all sorts of different gems that they have kind of mastery over, which they kind of hoard. They are the masters and mistresses of all the rivers and lakes, and therefore of the rains, and therefore of growth of all the vegetation. So they're really, really important in the sort of economy of life in traditional society. Very, very powerful forces. The Buddha himself is actually called the Mahanaga in places. As well, so that again, trying to get over the fact that the Buddha, getting away from anything sort of rational or conceptual, the Buddha has that kind of quality of presence. And the Nagas are associated with wisdom as well, sort of magical, privileged wisdom, vidya. They're the kind of the holders of that, even sort of jealously guarding it. Not necessarily enlightened wisdom, not necessarily anything to do with following the path, but the sort of, the sort of basic wisdom of how life works. So extraordinarily important, very much associated with the depths, the deep energies, if you like, in the earth, in life, in the human psyche, even. Very, very important figures. In later Indian Buddhist tradition, it's the Nagas that hold what's known as the perfection of wisdom literature, this vast literature which is the absolute consummation of the Buddha's wisdom teachings, which he gave, but then they were hidden in the depths of the ocean with the Nagas. And there's a character named Nagarjuna who's associated with the sort of emergence of this literature. And you have these wonderful paintings in Buddhist art of Nagarjuna in a boat on this great ocean. It's got this vast lake, and an absolutely gorgeous Naga princess, has to be a Naga princess, coming up, giving this wonderful book of wisdom. Again, there's a kind of symbolism there to meditate on. So, what are we talking about when we talk about the Nagas? What's this pointing to in the Buddha's experience? It's telling us something actually about the nature of enlightenment. This is part of the Buddha's enlightenment. It's part of the unfolding of the Buddha's enlightenment. He wraps himself 7 times around the Buddha, protecting from and enveloping. Well, 7 again is one of those wonderful magic numbers. And of course, in some forms of Indian tantric and Buddhist tantric systems, you have what's known as 7 chakras, 7 energy centers that go up the body, which describe the movement of energy from lower states bound up with lower things, right up to the opening of what's called the 1000th of the lotus above the crown of the head. So some people read this particular episode as what the Buddha's really doing. Here it's showing how enlightenment brings about the transformation of all the energy of the psycho-physical, spiritual being. Enlightenment, in other words, isn't something in your head. It's the total transformation of all energy. And some people read this, the falling of the rain. It's not really that the great King Cobra has to protect the Buddha from that. Really, the falling of the rain is the shower of bliss that happens when your energy is totally transformed. When all the energy is released, refined and transformed, there is then the showering of the great bliss. And the cobra turning into the beautiful young prince who bows to the Buddha and disappears. In some ways, one of the ways when I read that is that what that is actually describing is what the Buddha's consciousness is like now. It's like that of it's ever fresh, like a youth, like a beautiful youth. Even when the Buddha is an old man of 80 and his body is decrepit, his consciousness is still sparkling, fresh, radiant, new, creative, responsive. It's not tired, it's not old in any way. This is why we say that we speak of nirvana as the deathless, the amrita. When you gain enlightenment, you drink the nectar of not just of great bliss, but of immortality, which isn't just living forever in a slightly miserable state, but it's this ever fresh consciousness, this sparkling, radiant, vast awareness, which this beautiful young prince describes, it tries to evoke. Because, the prince is always on the way to becoming the king, isn't he? The eternal youth, the eternally youthful one, the primordially youthful one, if you like. In some Buddhist traditions, they talk about enlightenment as the attainment of the youthful vase-like body. That's the way they describe enlightenment, the youthful vase-like body. Wow. Imagine having something like that. Amazing. So anyway, where are we? I'm going to go away. So this is a sort of reading of the symbolism. So, okay, I think that this story, and of course, this is a story, this is all imagery, and this kind of interpretation is one way of interpreting. It's not exhaustive. That's the brilliant thing about metaphors and symbols and stories. They are multivalent in their meanings. You can explore them in all sorts of different ways. No doubt you've got your own resonances with snakes and youths and yogis under trees and all that sort of thing. Well, you can go away with that and do something with it. But we have got to get a little bit practical too. Well, this is practical, isn't it? We'll get a bit more practical. What I want to talk about is energy. If this is about the transformation of energy, and that enlightenment is this fresh, sparkling energy that's always available, we need to have a look at the condition of our own energy. One of the things that's very, very noticeable is how tired everybody is. It's one of the things I notice a lot. Coming here, and well, even where I live, people often complain of exhaustion and tiredness, and they can feel a bit weighed down by, all the different things going on in their life and world. And that's something we put up with it, don't we? We put up with low energy. We put up with tiredness. We've just got to slog through and get through the week and get to Sunday and, get the papers, the coffee and all the rest of it and blob out. And then hopefully we'll have some energy. But we can do better than that. I think we need to look at energy and look at what's going on, not put up with, the status quo of feeling tired and feeling low energy. Let's look at energy. And I'm going to look at energy under some headings, not a traditional set, but a set that I came up with this afternoon. I want to talk about rousing energy, channeling energy, releasing energy, purifying energy, and displaying energy. So I want to talk first of all about rousing energy. And well, first of all, perhaps I want to say something about energy. What do I mean by energy? Last night in the men's Mitra study group, I did a little presentation on a section of mindfulness in the Dhammapada, where right at the beginning the Buddha says, mindfulness is the way to the deathless, unmindfulness the way to death. Those who are mindful do not die, the unmindful are already dead. And I pointed out that the word for mindfulness is apramada, which is more like wakefulness, vigilance. And one of the things I was trying to get across is that I was relating it to the feeling of being alive. Sometimes when you hear discourses on mindfulness, people think that they've got to sort of do something weird to kind of become conscious of themselves, with a sort of little man on their head that's kind of, you notice it, be mindful, everybody, No, be mindful means, as human beings, we are already aware. We have some awareness. We have a living quality of awareness and wakefulness, and we need to just get in touch with that. So, when we're talking about rousing energy, one of the first things we have to do is to sort of celebrate our living beingness, the actual quality of being alive in that very, very ordinary human way. The wind on your face, the rain on your face, the sun on your face, the fresh air when you walk through the botanical gardens, as I did the other day, the sight of the wonderful leaves and so on and so forth. That basic kind of response that this is so good, being alive. It's very, very important to have that. This is the first stage of the Metta by the way. You're not sort of pumping yourself up with sort of positive affirmation in the first stage of the metta, though that can help. You're waking up to being alive. And it's actually a wonderful thing. Okay, maybe you've had a bad day. Maybe you've had a bad life. Maybe there's trauma, stuff. But hey, you are alive. And there is something sort of, well, absolutely wonderful in that sense of the preciousness of human life, the pleasure of breathing, for a start. And have you ever noticed that? Especially if maybe you've had a cold and you haven't been able to breathe, and then it goes, it's such a great feeling to be able to just breathe. And that wonderful sort of rhythm and the sort of refreshment that comes when the air comes in, the relaxation when the air goes out. So there's this very basic sort of sense of wakefulness. That's the basis of mindfulness. But there's more to it than that when we talk about rousing energy. When you start to have that kind of quality of awareness and wakefulness, questions come. Okay, this is wonderful. This is what life is all about. What can I do to develop this? What can I do to rouse this? Because this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. This shows a kind of potential. This shows a kind of direction. It's not the finished article, because it comes and goes. I need to make this quality of being awake the centre of my life. And this is what we call Shraddha in Buddhism, making this quality of wakefulness the centre of your life. Shraddha is translated as faith, but it's more like waking up to that potential in you of this quality of consciousness that could develop sort of endlessly in the direction of enlightenment. So when we're talking about rousing energy, we're talking about this. If we don't do this, if we think, all right, life is putting up with a load of rubbish, putting up with a load of rubbish, a job I don't like, with people I don't like, and going home to a place I don't like, but it's the only thing I can do, and I've got to get through it because of all the responsibilities I have. I think we can do a lot better. I think we can really do a lot better than that. Okay, we have challenges that we have to meet, but you need to start rousing your energy for a different kind of life through making this quality of wakefulness the centre of things. So what you've got to do next? Well, in order to do that, you have to channel energy. Because when you wake up like this, there is definitely energy. You notice it when people go on their first retreat, just a weekend retreat. Very often, there's a tremendous release of energy. I remember the first weekend retreat I was on, I was as high as a kite for weeks afterwards. It really, it was loads better than acid. It really was. It made acid seem like, popcorn. The energy release was amazing because, suddenly all the sort of, I'd found something of tremendous sort of meaning and value that I could fall in love with. And this quality of consciousness and energy that I could really live from, tremendous. But then it needs to be channeled, because the trouble is when you're 17, 18 years old and you're high as a kite, you usually go and do some rather daft things, and you dissipate the energy and you crash and burn and pillage sometimes. So you have to channel. And the channeling of energies, this is what practice is. I'm going to use the word, there is the word discipline which you could use, which is perhaps not very popular, but setting up a kind of practice, what's called a charya. We're called Dharmacharis, that's at the name of our ordination, and that means a life dedicated to practice. It shouldn't be too heavy at first. It shouldn't be sort of, right, meditate at this time, and you close down the energy. You start developing a kind of routine to your life, which is about directing this energy in the direction of developing this quality of awareness. So this means, for example, a really good idea, very early on in your Dharma life, meditate first thing in the morning. You know, before you do anything else, set the pattern of the day. Tune in to what is most important. Tune into that quality of awareness. Okay, maybe only 20 minutes at first. Maybe you can build that up. But channel the energy. And then start taking that sense of a much more conscious life into all the affairs of daily life. Modern life is totally unconducive to the channeling of energy. It's absolutely appalling. I mean, the enemy of Dharma life is the modern world right now. I mean, amazing. Even among wonderful Buddhists, you're doing a study group, somebody's out on their iPhone, and then they're back in, and then they're out. And you think, well, what's that doing to your consciousness? Here we are, focusing on the Dharma. I mean, you could be, I don't know, you might be placing bets on your favourite horse or something like that. Having a really sort of serious spat with, your boyfriend or something. I mean, that's going to break you up. That's going to dissipate your consciousness. It's going to create tensions. Energy is going to sort of leak away and so on. So you've got to start looking at your life, how you can sort of make what's important central. And that does mean, great, it does mean internet fasting, WhatsApp fasting, just stopping all that kind of stuff. It might also mean that you need to start thinking about the kind of people that you spend time with, how you do your day. But if you want to make progress, if you want to channel your energy in that direction, you have to start thinking about reducing input and building up this direction. There's a lovely saying of the Buddha in the Dhammapada which puts it very well. Irrigators channel water, fletchers straighten arrows, wise men channel their energies in the direction of enlightenment. And really, but the image of that's like an irrigator, channeling the water to make the crops grow. That's like the fletcher straightening the arrow so that it will really move to the target. That's what we're doing in our Dharma life. And, you feel it, don't you, sometimes in the mindfulness of breathing. You get that sense of the channeling of energy. Not forcing it, but gathering it. It's a lovely feeling, isn't it, sometimes in mindfulness, that you're just gathering that energy and attention. It's all off over there, away with the fairies, but you can bring it into this more and more around the breath, and then sort of not just around the breath anymore, but within itself, and the energy starts to build, because more and more of you, more and more of your attention is just flowing into this quality of awareness, which just gets deeper and deeper. The channel gets deeper as more energy goes in and gets concentrated. Well, you've got to try and translate that into daily life. What can I do in my daily life with all the complexity of work and family and all the rest of it? How can I make it a bit more congruent with what I'm doing in meditation? I have to ask questions about that. Maybe that's something you can do in the groups if we have time for groups, because as usual, I'm going on a bit. So, channeling energy, and then releasing energy. Down at Padmavajra, I sometimes do meditation retreats, and I was doing a meditation retreat recently, a week-long retreat. And in the course of meditation, I had a very strong sense of, I could almost sort of picture it, that my being, my consciousness, had within it various sort of blocks and fetters of one kind or another, so that it just wasn't flowing sufficiently. It wasn't just not flowing, I just couldn't sort of move it, as it were, to the next stage. It was like being a little bit like being in a maze or a labyrinth. I can walk this way so far, and there's a block, and I can walk this way so far, and then there's a block, and then there's that way. Very, very interesting. It was almost like my consciousness was like a sort of circle or sphere with these blocks, these impediments to further exploration. It was really quite vivid. And I think it's quite important to try and feel that. You might feel it reflected in your bodily experience, if not your actual physical body, your mind created bodily image, if you like. But you can sort of feel this, and it's very important to investigate into it. Where are there the blocks in energy? And they are the blocks in this wakefulness, this quality of consciousness that we're trying to move to. And when I looked into it, I found a very interesting thing. What are the blocks about? I'm sure they'll change the next time I give a talk on this, but the thing I noticed more than anything else, I'm far too over-concerned with whether or not people like me or not. Far too over-concerned of being approved of. And regardless of whether I'm doing any good, it's not that, it's about spiritual friends having a good opinion of me because of my moral and spiritual qualities. It's just simply, I don't want people to not like me, and I don't want the world to disapprove of me. I don't want to be sort of thought badly of, and so on and so forth. And that puts a tremendous limitation on where I can go, because it means, if I'm not careful, I compromise. And when I compromise energy. And I found that really interesting. Really interesting. How much sort of reputation in a very kind of ordinary worldly sense is more important to me than the free flowing of energy. I mean, I think it was partly prompted by meditating a lot on Padmavajra, and particularly in his yogi form in the cremation grounds, because he's a thoroughly disreputable outcast kind of figure in that. And I think it just revealed to me how much over-concerned I am with sort of conformity. So that might be worth looking into. How much are you over-concerned with being thought well of by, sometimes your nearest and dearest, and that you therefore compromise your energy and values, and therefore restrict your energy in the direction of enlightenment? Sometimes it's an enormous relief, isn't it, when you can really fully open up to a friend, really talk about something that, there's something really bothering you. You're very concerned about what people think about you because you have these private sort of thoughts and so on. And have you ever had the experience of somebody coming to you? I get this a lot. I've got to tell you something. It's really, really serious. It's really heavy, and I'm going, gulp, get ready, get the metabhavna burners going, this is, relax, open up, what's the comfort? And then they say something about some fantasy they have, and you is that any more? Is that it? And of course, the thing is, they've been so embarrassed by this area of their life, they think it's a real problem. Actually, it isn't. They've turned it, if you like, into a great big dragon. Actually, it's a little tiddler. It really is like a little tiddler that isn't really a problem at all. And there's an enormous release of energy in that. Sometimes it can be something quite major and heavy, and they've actually got to unburden and confess and open up so that they can go forward. Sometimes, I think, the blocks that we have in our consciousness is, and actually I think there are more of these than the sort of nasty stuff, is because we do not give expression to the really positive things in our nature. Sometimes I think people's lives, their love, their kindness, their generosity, their inspiration, their creativity has been sort of blocked by maybe family conditioning, circumstance, perhaps even their own sort of laziness too. And when they can give expression to that positive quality, there is a wonderful kind of release, a tremendous release of energy which starts to flow into their Dharma life. So look for those. Where are you holding and see, maybe it's not a sort of nasty monster that's in there. Actually, there's a beautiful prince or princess in there, absolutely dying to get out and find expression. I remember in the seminars that Sangha actually used to do back in the 60s and 70s, of course, there was an enormous lot of pop psychology that he was dealing with in those days, so people into, all those sort of, those psychotherapeutic techniques where, you've repressed all your anger and negativity, you've got to sort of get it out and vomit it forth, people in those days were really into kind of encounter groups, and where people would spend, weekends together, locked in a room, just absolutely sort of raging with each other, and through this great catharsis they'll arrive at the promised land. I mean, my impression is a lot of people just got more and more miserable, but anyway, don't want to knock it too much, but I remember Sangha actually was saying, well, we're told, we can be told that what is repressed material is always nasty, is always sort of negative. It's the modern psychotherapeutic equivalent of original sin. He said, actually, I've come to the conclusion that we repress the positive much more than the negative. That there's so many sort of positive impulses that we don't allow ourselves to express. Sometimes we can just be very frightened of expressing real love and generosity because of terrible fear of rejection. I remember an ordination course I was leading, a 4-month course in Spain years ago, and a few weeks in I realised I was so grumpy, really, really bad-tempered. Obviously leading the course, I couldn't sort of express that because that would have upset people, so it would be really kind of... But I thought, hey, why are you so grumpy? What's going on? You up this mountain, you're meditating, you can do anything. And I realised that throughout the day, I habitually didn't allow myself to act on positive impulses. An idea for a poem. No, I can't bother. Going to talk to someone who perhaps needs a bit of a hand. No, I need a rest. Bit more meditation. No, need a rest. You could do a drawing of that tree. No, I'm no good at drawing. And I thought, hang on, this is violence. All these things, and that energy isn't going away. It's not going to just disappear. That impulse to do something positive, that's not just going to say, oh, sorry I turned up, bye. No, the energy's going to be there, and it's going to turn septic. It's going to turn absolutely vile. It's going to, because it's going to start screaming at you, do something with me. So I had this precept, and it was always to do with positive things. If you think it, do it. If you think it, do it. So I did it. I acted on every positive impulse that came up, and the energy release was fabulous. And I think it was one of the happiest periods of my life, and one of the most creative. It helped that I was leading the course, because I could shape the course and all that sort of thing. But I, always, act on your positive impulse. Don't let it go sour. It will build, energy. So that's release. And then there's refining or purifying energy. And I think what I'm trying to get at here, this is, it's great to have energy aroused, but you need to start, really focusing it. And this is where I think meditation practice comes in quite strongly. What you're doing in meditation is constantly purifying the mind. You're constantly moving in the direction of skillful states and, turning aside unskillful states. You have to develop what's known as Dharma Pravijnana, investigation of mental states, really getting a feeling for what a skillful positive impulse is like and what it can do and where it can take you, and really getting a feeling of the restrictive nature of unskillfulness, really getting a feeling for that in meditation and going into it more and more. And this is what starts to open up here, is what's known as the dhyanas. The dhyanas really are states of just purer and purer energy. where your consciousness is just getting more and more pure, more and more focused, more and more concentrated, naturally concentrated. And there is with that a tremendous sort of expansion, Of course, at this stage of meditation practice, it's something that can be won and lost. You probably know sometimes when you've been meditating, when you're starting to sort of lift off, you start going, oh, I'm meditating, this is it. And then of course, immediately it closes down and you've made it, you've sort of tried to get hold of it. What you have to do is to sit lightly to it and allow the unfoldment to keep happening. Let the energy keep unfolding. And of course, the more you can immerse yourself in these states, the more that will expand, outwards in your daily life. But it only becomes permanent with the attainment of wisdom. You noticed in that verse of the Buddha that the greatest bliss of all is the fading away of the I am conceit. The I am conceit. A very interesting way of describing enlightenment. Conceit is very, very interesting in Buddhism. Mana. It's any view that fixes you. And there are three kinds of mana you might be interested to hear. There's the view that you are superior to others, the view that you are inferior to others. A lot of people suffer from that one. And the view that you are equal to others. A lot of people suffer from that one. So it's really interesting. So it's any kind of stance, fixed stance, where you're constantly sort of placing yourself in relation to others. You have to see through that. That limits your energy. That limits your free-flowing energy and the possibility, in a way, of real engagement with other people. You sometimes notice that, don't you, in communication. You're having a really good flowing communication with somebody, and then you become a bit self-conscious of hang on, what's going on here? What's happening? And again, it freezes the energy. It stops the flow. It stops the expansion. It stops the possibility of entering into new territory in that communication, that friendship with that other person. That's the I am conceit at work. We have to see through that. You have to see through that. You have to see it doesn't really exist. There isn't an I am in the first place. That's really through seeing that. That leads to the Buddha's enlightenment, as he says in that little verse. That is the greatest bliss of all. And this leads us to the last element of energy. I've called it display. Or effulgence. The Buddha's energy is, after enlightenment, the Buddha's energy is sort of unimaginable. It's totally freed up. And it's this, just this firework display of energy from a state of deep, deep peace. It's very interesting. We were studying some texts with Sangha actually years ago, and he was talking about the Buddha's day. And the Buddha never slept. The Buddha never slept. He rested, but there was no need for him to sleep because he hasn't got any, he's never making any effort to keep awareness going. A lot of the reason why we need to sleep, apparently, is because we make a lot of effort to stay aware, and we need a rest from that. But in the Buddha, there's nothing like that. So he enters this lovely twilight sort of state and sort of starts to emerge from that roughly around 4 o'clock in the morning our time, apparently, just before dawn, when the false dawn is coming in India. And that's when the devas come. That's apparently when the gods come for the teachings. There's another thing about the mystery of the Buddha. If you were around the Buddha in retreat with him, or wherever you were, the Buddha was very, very attractive to all sorts of beings in this universe which are there, but which we tend not to see. And very early in the morning, in that sort of change, that transitional time, that liminal time between night and day, these sort of heavenly beings would come to hear the Dharma from him. There's this, again, I see this as a sort of display of the Buddha's energy, the play of the Buddha's energy, if you like. So that's where it leads. That's where we're going to end up with our practice, reaching a point where energy is completely free-flowing. It's free-flowing to communicate the Dharma to anybody, any kind of being, exactly in a way that they need to hear it. Apparently what the Buddha would do after teaching the Devas, he'd kind of just look out and just sort of see who's around today, who needs the Dharma. And then he'd just go and communicate with them. It would all be spontaneous and natural, highly attuned, because there's no separation, there's no I am. There's just this wonderful free-flowing energy, wisdom energy, if you like, that's just going on and on. So that's my reading of tonight on the story of the Dragon King, Mucalinda. So respect your dragons, respect your energies. In our mythology, dragons have been seen as a bad thing, to be sort of knocked off. A great poem by Sangha called On Glastonbury Tor, which starts with the lines, "Dragons were slain here ages ago, dragons' blood soaked into the earth, miles deep, stained white chalk miles deep." We don't do that. We don't kill dragons. We don't kill snakes. We don't kill our energies. We rouse them, we channel them, we purify them, we let them display for the benefit of all beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Padmavajra. I'm not going to attempt to set a discussion question. We'll go into groups for 20-25 minutes and just share with your responses to anything that Padmavajra has said and any questions that you might have. So if you were on the latest newcomers course, if you go into the green room with Tansel,